It is the policy of the Mesquite Independent School District to maintain a professional business environment and workplace that is free of all forms of sexual harassment. Principals, teachers, supervisors, and employees who violate this policy are subject to disciplinary action up to and including termination. All employees are responsible for reporting incidences of sexual harassment, and MISD does not tolerate reprisal against a person who makes a sexual harassment complaint or witnesses who participate in the same. Unwelcome sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, or other verbal or physical conduct of a sexual nature will not be tolerated at school or at any school-related activity. Students found to have violated this rule are subject to Class 3 discipline. There are two types of sexual harassment that have been identified by the courts: quid pro quo and hostile environment. Quid pro quo involves implicit or explicit requests for sexual favors that may be used as condition or basis for employment or educational decisions or advancement. Quid pro quo is a Latin term that means this for that. This type usually happens when a person with power over the complainant asks for sexual favors in return for something. This could be explicitly asking, or it could be implied. A hostile environment is behavior that has the purpose or effect of unreasonably interfering with an employee's work or a student's ability to benefit from school by creating an intimidating, hostile, or offensive work or school environment. A hostile environment is one in which the environment has become filled with sexual-type behaviors to the point that it interferes with a person's motivation to come to work or a student's motivation to come to school. Sexual harassment includes, but is not limited to, unwelcome sexual advances, making sexually offensive remarks, requests for sexual favors, or other verbal, physical, or visual conduct of a sexual nature. Sexually offensive remarks can be a variety of things, including offensive jokes. Caution those you work with to not tell or send offensive jokes to others in the workplace. Administrators have specific duties in cases of student-to-student sexual harassment. They notify the Title IX coordinator first, then conduct an investigation. An administrator always interviews the complaining party first and is sure to gather all information available before coming to a conclusion. The very last thing to be done is to decide if discipline is warranted. As part of the normal day-to-day classroom discipline management, teachers handle minor problems between students before they escalate into sexual harassment. If a student comes to a teacher claiming sexual harassment, it is better in most cases to refer the student to an administrator to handle this situation. Some cautions to keep in mind when dealing with student-to-student sexual harassment cases. Each situation is judged individually. Claims of this type are given a priority status. All care will be given to avoid rushing to a conclusion, and sufficient witnesses will be called. Administrators are charged with judging each situation independently. Not all claims of sexual harassment are in fact sexual harassment. The administrator must decide based on many factors, such as the age of the student or the student's ability to reason. Situational factors must be taken into account as well. Administrators should always make sure to interview all witnesses named by the claimant and by the defendant. Sexual harassment cases are dealt with on a need-to-know basis. Don't get caught up in the gossip chain, and don't reveal confidential information to those who have no need to know the status of a situation. Keep thorough documentation of any situations that arise in your work area. You never know when you may be asked to give details, dates, and times to administrators in their investigation. Make sure that your written documentation is professional and free of grammatical and spelling errors, and free of opinions and emotions as well. In recent years, student-to-teacher sexual harassment has become more of a concern. When students get a crush on a teacher, they may flirt in class. Teachers are professional adults and are responsible for maintaining a professional relationship with students. Students can come forward at any time and claim the teacher started the flirtation. So it is wise not to encourage the student in any way, as Dr. Marianne Manos details in her book, Rumors, Lies, and Whispers. There are ways to protect yourself from these types of claims. First, set appropriate boundaries with your students. Document and notify your supervisor at the first occurrence of inappropriate behavior initiated by students. Avoid all situations that could have the appearance of impropriety and report inappropriate behavior between students and other staff. These are situations to avoid at all costs. Discussing inappropriate topics in class as a result of student-initiated questions. Engaging in dialogue of sexual topics. Discussing any topics in class which are not a part of text for your class. Flirting or suggestive talk. Listening to, joining in, or soliciting conversation with students about social plans or telling offensive jokes. More situations to avoid at all costs include putting a student on your lap, one-on-one conversations behind closed doors, giving rides home from school or events, any physical touching of any kind, hugging students or rubbing, patting, or massaging of any kind, touching a student's clothing or personal items. You should also avoid giving personal gifts, sending notes, letters, or emails of a personal nature, personal phone calls, meeting in a social setting, or inviting students to social events at your home. Teachers and administrators form meaningful relationships with students for the benefit of student learning. These relationships should be professional at all times. Kids don't need another friend. They need a caring adult role model. There are ways to avoid being accused of committing sexual harassment. You should educate yourself. Be sensitive and perceptive when interacting with others. Keep all actions job-related. Avoid personal relationships with students. Touch students only when necessary, and try to never be alone with a student. When harassment of a student by an adult is claimed, administrators must follow a specific procedure. Administrators must, by law, notify Child Protective Services within 48 hours if he or she has reason to believe child abuse has occurred. Teachers are also classified as professionals and must, by law, report suspected child abuse within 48 hours. Many times when a claim of sexual harassment is made by a student against the teacher is placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of the investigation. This is to protect the student and the employee. Administrators have specific duties in cases of employee-to-student sexual harassment claims. The administrator should notify the Title IX coordinator immediately. Central office personnel will conduct the investigation. The status of the employee during the investigation will be decided by Personnel Services. The decision on the need to notify Child Protective Services must be made within 48 hours of the complaining party's first reports. With employee-to-employee claims, the administrator must immediately notify the Title IX coordinator, and the flowchart of procedures must be followed. The administrator should notify the Title IX coordinator immediately. Central office personnel will conduct the investigation. The status of the employee during the investigation will be decided by Personnel Services. Complaints that rise above the organizational or school district level can go in a number of directions, but most go to the Office of Civil Rights. OCR investigates based on 3 questions. 1, does your district have a policy? 2, was the policy communicated? And 3, was the policy followed? The tie between sexual harassment and sexual discrimination is clear. Sexual harassment of students is covered by Title IX. Sexual harassment of employees is covered by Title VII. Liability is established for the organization when an appropriate person had actual notice of the abuse and was deliberately indifferent. An appropriate person is an official with the authority to take corrective action to end the discrimination. Anyone in a supervisory capacity can be the appropriate person. The teacher or coach closest to the situation is primarily charged with being vigilant to prevent situations where sexual harassment can occur. This includes monitoring students at all times. It is also extremely important to get information to an administrator so that he or she can take corrective action when needed. Deliberate indifference is when one who has the authority to address the alleged discrimination and to institute corrective measures has actual knowledge of the discrimination and fails to adequately respond. If you do nothing to prevent initial and/or recurring harassment, then you are creating liability for yourself. If your attempts to prevent sexual harassment are not successful, then it can be interpreted that you were deliberately indifferent. Sometimes patterns of behavior develop in a way that we may not see that a hostile environment is developing or a quid pro quo situation is emerging. Be on the lookout for these red flags: separate complaints about the same person or group of people, seemingly incorrect gossip that just won't go away, several separate complaints by the same complainant against the same accused. Annual training sessions with all employees must be conducted. The annual training consists of viewing the sexual harassment prevention video. All employees are responsible for documenting their completion of training. At other work sites, supervisors will conduct the training. All employees will receive an MISD brochure titled Understanding Sexual Harassment. We are all responsible for preventing sexual harassment. Sexual harassment can demoralize us. It can poison a positive work environment, and if substantiated, it can ruin careers and lives. Please take your responsibility seriously and work to prevent sexual harassment.